The morning sky over Fort Adams was pale, the sunlight barely breaking through thin clouds that stretched like a gray veil over the base. The gates, made of reinforced steel, towered above the surrounding landscape, designed to intimidate and command respect. Yet, among the early shift soldiers, there was a ripple of curiosity, a rare occurrence on this morning that promised nothing more than routine drills and paperwork. A figure approached the gates, walking with a steady rhythm that suggested both confidence and purpose. She wore a standard-issue uniform, plain yet immaculate, her hair pulled tightly into a practical bun. No medals adorned her chest, no insignia marked her authority. At first glance, she seemed unremarkable, a newcomer perhaps, or some administrative clerk assigned to observe the base. But there was a precision in her movements, a subtle awareness in her posture, that immediately caught the attention of every soldier standing near the checkpoint. Private Mason, tasked with monitoring the gate that day, squinted at her through the morning haze. "Who is that?" he muttered to his partner, a young recruit still trying to memorize the names of the officers. "I don't know," his partner whispered, "but she doesn't look like she's lost. Look at her walk." Indeed, there was something in the way she carried herself, controlled, deliberate, calm, that hinted she belonged somewhere far beyond the confines of Fort Adams' rigid hierarchy. Her eyes scanned the base with quiet scrutiny, taking in the guard towers, the lines of barracks, the assembly yards, and the compound where classified operations were known to take place. She noted details most soldiers would overlook: a misaligned security camera, a guard's slightly distracted stance, a pattern in the base's daily routines. Inside the general's office, the mood was far different. General Rourke, a man with decades of service etched into the lines of his face, was reviewing personnel reports when a knock at the office door disrupted his concentration. "Sir, there's a woman at the gate. She claims to have orders to report here immediately," said a lieutenant, a hint of uncertainty in his tone. Rourke frowned, pushing his glasses up the bridge of his nose. "Describe her," he barked, irritation creeping into his voice. "She's unremarkable, sir. No insignia, no rank badge. Just a standard uniform," the lieutenant replied. The general's frown deepened. In his experience, anyone arriving without proper identification was a liability, a potential threat to base security. His mind raced through the possibilities: civilian contractor, misfiled personnel, or worse, a mistake in the chain of command. He rose, straightening his uniform, and motioned for the lieutenant to follow him. By the time Rourke reached the gate, the woman had already presented her papers to the guards, documents that gleamed with classified stamps and codes that the average soldier would never recognize. She handed them over with calm, unshaking hands, her gaze unwavering. "General Rourke," she said, her voice steady, professional, but carrying a tone that brooked no argument. The general halted in place, scrutinizing her. The soldiers standing nearby whispered among themselves, sensing the tension. "You're off the base," he barked suddenly, his voice cutting like a whip. "This is a restricted area. Who are you?" Her eyes didn't waver. She responded with quiet authority, almost a whisper against the wind. "Sir, I'm expected." The general's jaw tightened. His authority was absolute, yet something about her presence unsettled him. She stood perfectly still, unwavering, exuding a confidence that only experience born of high-stakes situations could instill. The soldiers snickered quietly behind their hands, assuming that she was about to be escorted off the base for overstepping. They had no idea how wrong they were. For a few moments, the wind carried only the sound of distant engines and the rustle of flags atop the guard towers. The tension was palpable. No one dared move first. "Expected by whom?" Rourke demanded, stepping closer, the weight of his presence pressing down on her. "Sir, by orders from the Pentagon. I am here under classified instructions," she replied evenly. Her voice held no trace of fear, no hint of hesitation. It was as if she had faced far more dangerous situations than an irate general in a sunlit courtyard. The soldiers at the gate exchanged nervous glances, classified orders that bypassed the general. That wasn't supposed to happen, not under his watch. And yet, here she was, calm, unshaken, ready to step into the eye of a storm no one yet understood. Rourke's eyes narrowed. He had heard whispers before of operatives who carried missions beyond the base's comprehension. But the thought that one might be standing in front of him now was almost too much to process. He waved at the guards, signaling them to step aside, though his fingers twitched with restrained tension. The woman stepped forward, her movements deliberate and measured. Each footfall seemed to echo the quiet certainty of someone who had survived situations that most officers could only read about in declassified reports. As she walked past the guards and toward the main compound, whispers followed her like shadows. "Who is she?" a soldier muttered under his breath. "No idea," another replied, "but I don't think she's anyone we can mess with." The general followed, keeping his distance, his mind racing. Something was happening on this base that day that would challenge every rule he had spent decades enforcing. Something, or someone, was about to rewrite the boundaries of authority. By the time she reached the steps of the Central Operations Building, the entire base had taken notice. Soldiers paused in their drills, officers stopped mid-conversation, and a hush fell over the compound. The name of her call sign was still unknown, but the aura of controlled expertise was unmistakable. Inside, she paused, scanning the room with calm, unerring precision. Her eyes met the general, and in that instant the air seemed to thrum with unspoken tension. He had expected hesitation, doubt, or fear, but she showed none. She was here on a mission, and nothing, no rank, no protocol, no general, would stop her from completing it. In that brief moment, as the morning sun broke through the clouds casting light across the base, the soldiers understood something crucial. She was not here to follow rules. She was here to command respect, to fulfill orders that even the most seasoned officers could not comprehend. And the general, for the first time in decades, felt the weight of uncertainty press against his authority. The whispers began in earnest that day, spreading like wildfire through the ranks. Who is she? Where did she come from? What is her mission? No one had answers, but all knew one thing: Fort Adams would never be the same. Her arrival marked the beginning of a chain of events that would test loyalty, challenge authority, and reveal a hidden world of operations few had ever glimpsed. The base had thought it was ready for anything. It was not ready for her. The corridor leading to the general's office seemed longer than usual that morning, though in reality it was no more than 100 feet of polished concrete and steel. Yet every step she took resonated like a drumbeat, drawing the attention of officers, NCOs, and enlisted personnel alike. Whispers swirled behind her. Who is she? How did she get clearance? Is this some kind of test? Even seasoned soldiers paused, sensing that the atmosphere of Fort Adams had shifted from routine to something charged, almost electric. Inside the office, General Rourke stood behind his massive oak desk, the weight of decades of authority pressing into the lines of his face. He had already been briefed, briefly, by his aide on her arrival, classified orders bypassing his oversight, a young woman with no visible rank claiming she was expected. Every instinct told him it was a mistake, a breach of protocol that demanded immediate correction. "Sir, she's here," his aide reminded him, hesitating, unsure whether the general wanted to see her personally or simply dismiss her from the base altogether. "Send her in," Rourke barked, though his tone carried more skepticism than command. He straightened his uniform, adjusted the epaulets on his shoulders, and forced a calm he didn't feel. When she entered, the room seemed to contract. Soldiers outside the office noted the change in energy as the door closed behind her. She moved with a quiet authority, every step measured, deliberate, unhurried. Her eyes, sharp and calculating, met the general's immediately. There was no fear, no uncertainty, only a calm, unflinching awareness that challenged every assumption he held about control, command, and authority. "You're off this base," Rourke said immediately, his voice low but cold. He did not rise from his chair, choosing instead to let his presence dominate the space. "This is restricted property. Identify yourself." Her gaze never wavered. She stood tall, shoulders squared, hands clasped lightly in front of her. "Sir," she said evenly, "I am here under direct orders from the Department of Defense. My presence is classified and my mission requires immediate action." Rourke's brow furrowed. "Classified, you say? Do you understand what you're asking of me? This is my base. I have the authority here. You—" "I understand," she interrupted gently, though her voice carried the weight of someone used to commanding rooms, not asking permission. "But you were never briefed because the nature of my mission requires discretion. You will be notified in time, General, but for now, your compliance is appreciated." The words were simple, but the effect was seismic. The general froze, suddenly aware that this was no ordinary breach of protocol. The young woman standing in front of him wasn't a clerk, intern, or civilian contractor. She was someone with experience, authority, and a reputation that stretched into corners of military operations even he had only heard whispered about in secure corridors. "Do you know who you are speaking to?" he asked, his voice tinged with both anger and curiosity. "I do," she replied, her eyes steady. "And I also understand the chain of command. My orders simply bypass it in this instance. I will comply with your requests where possible, but my mission takes precedence." The general's jaw tightened. Soldiers and officers alike, even those outside the office, could feel the tension radiating from the door. Some of the young lieutenants exchanged nervous glances, wondering if they were about to witness a confrontation the likes of which Fort Adams had never seen. "You think your presence here grants you authority?" Rourke asked sharply, rising from his chair. His movements were controlled but forceful. He wanted to dominate this room, assert his experience and seniority, remind everyone, including her, that this was his domain. She did not flinch. Instead, she shifted slightly, her eyes scanning the room, noting every exit, every camera, every officer present. Her composure was absolute. "Sir," she said softly, "authority comes from action, not rank. I am here to accomplish what cannot be done by traditional command alone. You will be briefed when it is safe to do so." The general's fists clenched at his sides. He had seen confidence before. He had seen arrogance. But he had never faced someone who combined both with such calm efficiency that the very air seemed to shift. His mouth opened and closed, words caught somewhere between indignation and disbelief. Outside the office, the soldiers' whispers had grown into low murmurs. The woman in uniform had not just arrived. She had challenged the general's authority, and the way she did it, without a single raised voice or disrespectful gesture, made them stop and listen. It was as if the base itself had recognized that something extraordinary was in their midst. "You have one chance," Rourke said finally, his voice controlled but sharp. "Leave the base now. Return through the gate. This is not a negotiation. You are out of place here." For the first time, a faint smile touched her lips, not smug, not arrogant, but confident. "Sir," she replied, "leaving is not an option. My mission begins now. I understand the risk you feel, but delaying jeopardizes lives. I will take full responsibility for compliance with orders." A hush fell over the room. Even the general's aide, trained in reading subtle cues, noticed the shift in tension. Here was someone who could defy him completely, yet not out of disrespect, out of necessity. Rourke's mind raced. He thought of the classified briefings, the mission folders marked top secret, eyes only, the whispers of operatives who had performed feats no officer would believe. Could it be? Could this unassuming figure standing before him be one of them? One of the legends whose name he had only seen buried deep in redacted files? "Your call sign?" he asked suddenly, almost without thinking. The woman straightened further, the faintest glint of resolve in her eyes. "Iron Raven, sir," she said. The words, simple and precise, hung in the air like a thunderclap. Rourke froze. He knew that name. He had read about it in files that few had access to, missions so sensitive that even high-ranking officers could not discuss them openly. The call sign was not just a name, it was a reputation, a warning, a shadow whispered through the corridors of covert operations. And now that shadow was standing directly in front of him. Outside, soldiers sensed the shift. Something had changed. A power dynamic they could not define yet was taking shape. The general, usually the embodiment of authority, found himself silent, unsure of the right move. All his decades of command, every drill, every decision, every chain of command, suddenly felt inadequate in the presence of this one operative. Iron Raven's presence was not loud or boisterous. There were no dramatic displays of rank or medals. Yet she radiated authority, competence, and an unspoken command that could bend even a general's hesitation into compliance. For the first time in his career, Rourke understood that authority was not always visible, and experience was not always obvious. Some missions required more than protocol. They required precision, judgment, and courage beyond conventional hierarchy. And Iron Raven had all three in abundance. He took a breath, trying to collect himself. The soldiers outside were watching, officers waiting, tension high. "Very well," he said finally, his voice measured but quiet. "Stay, but you will report directly to me before taking any action. I need to understand everything." She nodded once, acknowledging him without hesitation. "Understood, General," she said. And in that moment the base seemed to shift. The murmurs softened, the soldiers returned to their posts, but the air remained charged. Iron Raven had arrived, not as a visitor, not as an intruder, but as a force that would reshape Fort Adams forever. The general, who had ordered her off the base mere moments ago, now found himself silent, uncertain, and acutely aware that he had just witnessed the arrival of someone whose legend far exceeded the bounds of his command. And outside the office the base waited, aware that this encounter was only the beginning. The moment Iron Raven had walked into the general's office, the atmosphere of Fort Adams had shifted. Outside the thick doors, the usual hum of the base, footsteps, distant engines, soldiers calling out drill commands, felt muted, as if the base itself were holding its breath. Whispers began almost immediately, traveling through the barracks, across the training yards, and into every office. "Did you see her?" one sergeant murmured to another as they passed the compound. "Who is she?" "No idea," the other replied, his voice low, but the general, he froze. Never seen him like that. The rumors spread like wildfire, each soldier adding a layer of intrigue and sometimes exaggeration. By mid-morning, nearly everyone on the base had a version of her story, though none knew the truth. Some claimed she was a covert intelligence officer. Others swore she had been part of missions so secret that they didn't exist in any records. Every whisper amplified her presence. Meanwhile, in the intelligence office, classified monitors flickered with updates. Files with her name, or rather her call sign, appeared on encrypted screens. Iron Raven. Officers who had never interacted with her watched with a mixture of awe and trepidation. Even the analysts who dealt daily with top-secret information found themselves leaning forward, drawn to the legend in front of them. Private Daniels, new to the base, whispered to his roommate, shaking slightly. "Have you seen the files? Iron Raven. She's real." His roommate scoffed nervously, trying to mask his unease. "Real? The name in the top classified tier. They say she saved teams that were completely lost. Missions everyone thought impossible. I don't even know how to explain it." Across the base, patterns of movement subtly changed. Guards glanced more often at their surroundings. Officers checked encrypted messages on their tablets, and trainees hesitated in the drill yard, sensing an invisible weight pressing down. Even mundane routines, the passing of orders, the distribution of equipment, felt charged, as if the mere presence of Iron Raven had redefined priorities. In the mess hall, groups of soldiers clustered together, trading stories. "She's a legend," one whispered, lowering his voice so others wouldn't hear. "Some say she was in Afghanistan, deep behind enemy lines, extracted a team of 5 under impossible conditions. Then there's other things I shouldn't repeat." A young lieutenant, overhearing this, frowned. "You're repeating rumors. None of that is confirmed." "But it is confirmed," another countered, leaning in, eyes wide. "The call sign itself, Iron Raven, only a handful of people get that. Only someone who's been vetted for the most dangerous operations, and she's here, right here." Meanwhile, the general retreated into his office, packing. His mind replayed the encounter, the quiet defiance and the unmistakable authority that Iron Raven had carried without raising her voice. He had spent decades enforcing discipline, commanding respect and maintaining order. And yet she had challenged every expectation in a single exchange. His officers had waited for him to react with anger, to assert dominance, but he found himself uncertain, silent, even reverent. "I've ordered her off the base," he muttered to his aide, "and yet she's here and I can't just dismiss her. Do you know who she is?" The aide, a seasoned officer with access to limited intel, shook his head. "Sir, only fragments. Just her call sign, Iron Raven, and the missions she's been involved in. Highly classified, more than anyone here should know. We've only heard whispers." "Whispers?" Rourke repeated under his breath, a frown deepening. "Whispers are all anyone has, yet they command attention. She commands attention, and she's only begun." Back on the parade ground, soldiers who had witnessed her arrival couldn't stop talking. Some drew comparisons to legendary figures from history, others to operatives whose names were buried in classified files. Every rumor painted her as fearless, precise, and near mythical. By mid-afternoon, the entire base seemed to have split into 2 factions, those who were in awe and those who were skeptical, trying to rationalize what they had seen. Conversations in the officers' lounge echoed with the same sentiment, respect mixed with fear. "She's dangerous," a captain muttered. "Not because of hostility, but because she's unpredictable, and unpredictable in her field means outcomes we can't control." "Maybe that's why she's here," another suggested, voice tinged with cautious optimism. "Sometimes the impossible needs someone like that, someone who doesn't follow normal protocols." Even those who had never seen her in person began to internalize the legend. Documents marked with her call sign circulated under high security, mission briefings, encrypted communications, and declassified operations from years prior. Each document confirmed stories that had sounded exaggerated in the whispers of lower-ranked soldiers. She wasn't just competent, she was exceptional, operating at a level most officers could only dream of. As the afternoon wore on, her presence began affecting more than whispers. Minor disruptions, once considered routine, now seemed charged with importance. Schedules were adjusted, security measures tightened, and communications prioritized. Everyone on the base, from the highest-ranking officer to the newest recruit, understood that something significant had arrived, and all were waiting, some nervously, for the next move. Even the general's senior staff could not help but acknowledge the subtle shifts. His usual dominance in the room was tempered by an unspoken understanding that Iron Raven represented an authority beyond their standard chain of command. He had tried to dismiss her, tried to assert control, yet every instinct told him that doing so could compromise not just the mission, but the lives of soldiers under his command. "Orders?" one aide finally asked, breaking the silence. Rourke rubbed his temple, eyes closing briefly. "Watch everything," he said quietly, almost to himself, "and do nothing to interfere, at least until we understand what we're dealing with." By the time night fell over Fort Adams, the base was alive with anticipation. Guards on the towers scanned with increased vigilance. Soldiers murmured quietly in the barracks, replaying the day's events in their minds. Even routine drills carried an undertone of tension, as if the presence of one operative had shifted the entire base's equilibrium. Iron Raven herself moved through the base with calm efficiency, observed but unobtrusive. She spoke to no one unless necessary, yet her presence was unmistakable. Soldiers who had attempted to gauge her character quickly realized that she was aware of their attention, yet completely unaffected by it. In her silence, she commanded more authority than any shouted order ever could. And so the whispers continued, spreading like wildfire through the base, fueled by awe, fear, and curiosity. Every officer, soldier, and recruit sensed it. A storm had arrived, and her call sign, Iron Raven, was at its center. No one knew what she was here to accomplish, but all understood this. Fort Adams would never be the same again. The legend had arrived, and with it, a sense of anticipation that bordered on reverence. Some hoped to witness her brilliance firsthand. Others feared the consequences of her actions. Even General Rourke, seated alone in his office, could not deny it. The woman he had tried to dismiss had changed the energy of the entire base, had cast doubt on every protocol he held sacred, and yet he could not look away. Iron Raven had arrived, and tomorrow the base would see why her presence demanded more than obedience. It demanded respect, focus, and absolute attention. The morning air inside the Central Operations Building was cool, sterile, and charged with anticipation. Soldiers and officers filed into the briefing room, the usual chatter subdued. Something had changed overnight at Fort Adams. Whispers of Iron Raven had traveled through every corner of the base, seeding both awe and trepidation. Everyone who entered sensed the shift. Today was not an ordinary day. General Rourke stood at the head of the room, behind the long, polished table, his expression unreadable. His mind replayed yesterday's confrontation with Iron Raven again and again. A woman with no visible rank, no accolades, yet a presence that commanded authority had walked in and challenged him, and won the room's attention without a single raised voice. His jaw tightened. He had ordered her off the base, but now she had been approved by higher authority. The doors swung open and she entered, flanked by two military intelligence officers. She moved with calm precision, her boots clicking softly against the polished floor. The room, already quiet, seemed to draw in a collective breath. Every head turned, every eye followed her as she approached the front. No one spoke. No one dared. On the large digital display behind the general, a file blinked onto the screen, bold and authoritative. Call sign, Iron Raven, authorized operations clearance. The letters seemed to vibrate in the minds of everyone present. There was no rank, no name, just a call sign that carried decades of classified operations behind it. A murmur rippled through the room. Some officers froze, staring at the screen in disbelief. Others whispered to their neighbors. Few had ever heard the name in person, and even fewer had seen anyone live up to its reputation. General Rourke stepped forward, trying to assert control. "You are Iron Raven," he said, the words tasting strange on his tongue. He had read files, briefings, and reports, but no document could prepare him for the reality standing before him. "I've heard the name. I've read the files, but I've never," his voice faltered. Iron Raven remained calm, hands lightly clasped in front of her. Her eyes met his, unwavering, and for a moment the general realized that she was not there to impress or intimidate. She was there to perform a mission. Her presence carried authority without arrogance, competence without showmanship. It was a type of control that even the most experienced leaders found unsettling. "Sir," she said finally, her voice smooth but firm, "I am here under direct orders from the Department of Defense. My mission requires immediate attention, and your cooperation is necessary to prevent jeopardy to lives under threat." The room seemed to shrink around the words. Officers exchanged uneasy glances. Even those who had dismissed the rumors were beginning to understand the gravity of her presence. The general, who prided himself on control, found himself silent. He had expected hesitation, fear, or even arrogance, but not this. Not the calm, resolute command of someone whose authority was independent of rank. "Explain," he demanded, though his voice lacked its usual sting. Explain why someone of your level, with clearance that surpasses mine in classified operations, has been on my base without prior notification. Iron Raven's gaze swept over the room, noting each officer's posture, each soldier's alertness. She spoke carefully, every word precise. General, your base is secure and your personnel disciplined. My presence here is an operational necessity. The mission cannot be compromised by conventional oversight. Once briefed fully, you will understand that this is not insubordination, but the execution of a directive requiring immediate action. For a moment the room was silent, the weight of her words sinking in. The general struggled to reconcile what he knew of hierarchy with what he was witnessing. He had been in command for decades, faced crises in foreign countries, made life-or-death decisions. Yet here she stood, defying the traditional chain of command without disrespect, without challenge, commanding attention by the sheer certainty of her competence. A young lieutenant, unable to contain his curiosity, whispered to his neighbor, She's the real deal, isn't she?" His neighbor nodded, eyes wide. "No one moves like that unless they've survived things you wouldn't believe. They don't call her Iron Raven for nothing." The general turned his gaze back to Iron Raven. "Do you understand that you have effectively bypassed every protocol I enforce?" "I do," she replied evenly. "And I understand the risk that implies, but your orders as far as operational security allows will be respected. I require your cooperation, not your permission." Rourke's jaw tightened again. He had seen many officers overstep, many soldiers attempt to challenge his authority, but this was different. She was not challenging him personally, she was beyond the personal. Her authority came from skill, experience, and a mission that transcended normal boundaries. The room seemed to pulse with tension. Soldiers shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Analysts stared at screens, comparing known intelligence with what little they could infer. Every officer in the room knew that Iron Raven was not simply a newcomer, she was a catalyst. Her presence demanded immediate attention and absolute focus. Then the general noticed the small details, subtle but telling. Her uniform, though plain, was immaculate. Her boots polished to perfection, her movements deliberate. There was no sign of nervousness, no hesitation in her steps or words. Every aspect of her appearance and behavior spoke of someone trained to operate under conditions far beyond the ordinary constraints of a military base. And then it hit him, the stories, the whispered legends in encrypted files, missions deep behind enemy lines, rescue operations that had defied logic, operations so sensitive they were removed from all public and even internal record systems. The same missions he had read about, thinking them distant and abstract, were now embodied in this woman standing before him. Iron Raven was real, and she was here. A lieutenant coughed nervously, drawing attention back to the present. "Sir, should we begin the briefing?" Rourke nodded slowly. "Yes, but..." His eyes lingered on Iron Raven. "Let's proceed with caution and record everything. For the record, we need full accountability." Iron Raven acknowledged with a simple nod. "Understood, General. I will provide the operational briefing now." As she stepped forward to the digital display, her presence filled the room. The soldiers, officers, and analysts realized that what they were about to witness was not just a briefing. It was a demonstration of authority, experience, and precision at a level few could comprehend. For the first time, the general understood why she had been sent here. This was not simply a mission. It was a situation requiring someone who could act decisively, think independently, and command respect without relying on rank. Every eye in the room followed her movements, every ear tuned to her voice, every mind alert to her analysis. And when she finally began outlining the details of the upcoming operations, the room went silent. The soldiers and officers were not just listening. They were learning, absorbing, and realizing that the presence of Iron Raven would change everything they thought they knew about authority, competence, and the limits of operational command. For the general, the shock was complete. He had ordered her off the base, dismissed her presence, and assumed control. Now, faced with the reality of her call sign, her reputation, and the undeniable skill she radiated, he had nothing left to do but listen. And in that listening, he found a grudging respect, a recognition that some authority existed beyond personal command. Iron Raven had arrived, and the base would never be the same again. The general's silence, long and measured, spoke volumes. He had finally seen her true status, and no words could undo the impression she had made. The moment Iron Raven left the briefing room, the hum of Fort Adams returned, but the tension lingered like a heavy fog. Soldiers whispered behind closed doors, officers glanced at each other with wide eyes, and analysts returned to encrypted screens with a renewed sense of urgency. Everyone was aware that the woman in uniform was no ordinary operative. Even the most seasoned personnel felt it. Her presence had shifted the balance of authority on the base. Meanwhile, General Rourke retreated into his private office. His usually commanding demeanor was replaced by a rare hesitation. He paced, hands behind his back, mind racing through the reports he had read over the years. Files marked top secret, eyes only. Briefings so confidential that only a handful of generals had clearance, and intelligence assessments of missions executed in absolute secrecy all came to life in his memory. Iron Raven's call sign, her reputation, and the subtle authority she exuded were suddenly very real. The general had always prided himself on knowing the key players in covert operations, but now he realized something unnerving. He had underestimated her. The missions he had read about, the rescue of a downed reconnaissance team deep inside hostile territory, the extraction of high-value personnel under impossible conditions, and operations so sensitive that even their existence was classified, were all hers. He had dismissed the rumors as exaggeration, legends inflated over time. Yet here she was, standing before him in flesh and blood, a living testament to every story he had doubted. Rourke's aide entered the office cautiously. "Sir, you've been reviewing her files." "I am trying to understand them," the general admitted, rubbing his temple. "I thought I had seen the best. I thought I understood operational command. But this, she's on another level entirely." The aide nodded, understanding the weight of the moment. "Sir, these are just fragments of her record. The full scope is classified. She's Iron Raven. Only a handful of personnel have clearance to know everything she's accomplished. That's why she could bypass protocol. She's exceptional." Rourke exhaled slowly. Exceptional barely covered it. The operative before him had defied his authority without confrontation, yet demanded his respect. She did not ask for permission. She acted on knowledge, on preparation, and on experience far beyond anyone in this office. He thought back to the briefing, to the precision with which she had outlined operational objectives, to the calm authority in her voice, and to the subtle commands she issued without needing to raise them verbally. Every action she had taken was deliberate, every movement calculated. She had already earned the attention and trust of the entire room without demanding it, without threats, without a hint of arrogance. The general realized he had not just misjudged her. He had underestimated the very concept of authority she embodied. This was someone whose influence transcended rank, whose judgment could override even his own experience, and whose mission required a level of discretion and precision few could comprehend. He reviewed her file again, page by page. Operation after operation unfolded, each more incredible than the last. There was the hostage extraction in North Africa, executed under the cover of a diplomatic convoy, where she neutralized threats and secured every life without alerting local authorities. There was the infiltration of a hostile territory to retrieve critical intelligence, performed alone, relying on skills that seemed almost superhuman. And there were missions that were so secret that the files themselves were heavily redacted, leaving only fragments of what had been accomplished. Each mission told the same story. Iron Raven was not just highly trained, she was extraordinary. She had saved countless lives, altered strategic outcomes, and executed operations that no conventional force could attempt. And now she was on his base, under his roof, bypassing protocol and challenging assumptions. The general's hands tightened into fists, not from anger but from an odd mix of admiration and disbelief. He had seen soldiers falter under pressure, leaders miscalculate, and entire operations teeter on the edge of failure. Yet here was someone whose competence was unquestionable, whose judgment had already proven infallible, and whose presence demanded recognition from every person within earshot. He leaned back in his chair, the weight of decades pressing down on him. "So she's real," he murmured. "The legends, the files, it's all true." "Yes, sir," the aide replied. "And more. She's operating at a level few can even imagine. That's why she has clearance to bypass base protocol. She isn't here to challenge you personally. She's here because the mission demands someone who can succeed where others cannot." The general closed his eyes briefly. He had trained countless officers, commanded countless troops, and faced crises in ways that tested both strategy and instinct. Yet he felt a rare humility in the presence of someone whose capability was unmatched. Iron Raven was a reminder that the military hierarchy, while essential, was not always enough to address situations requiring extraordinary skill. Back across the base, soldiers began to notice subtle changes. Security protocols were adjusted to accommodate her presence. Operations that had previously followed strict chain-of-command rules were now temporarily adapted, allowing her to execute her mission with minimal interference. Even the training schedules seemed to shift, subtly reflecting the reality that she was no ordinary operative. Her presence had created a ripple effect across Fort Adams, an invisible yet undeniable acknowledgement of her authority. The general's mind raced. He considered every possible scenario, every contingency, every operational challenge that could arise. She had arrived for reasons he could only partially comprehend, yet the sense of urgency in her demeanor left no room for doubt. Delaying or obstructing her actions could have consequences far beyond the base. Every instinct, every protocol, and every expectation had to be reevaluated. He finally exhaled, slow and deliberate. "Prepare a secure briefing," he said to his aide. "We need to understand her objectives completely, and we need to align our personnel without interfering. Notify all relevant departments, operations, intelligence, and logistics. This is no ordinary mission." "Yes, sir," the aide replied, already moving to execute the orders. Rourke leaned back in his chair, staring at the blank wall as the implications of Iron Raven's presence settled over him. He had spent decades maintaining authority, enforcing discipline, and commanding respect. Now, he realized, authority was not always defined by rank or experience. It could be defined by precision, expertise, and the quiet but undeniable force of someone who had earned her place through action. He thought of the soldiers and officers under his command. How would they react to a woman who could bypass him with a single calm word, whose reputation alone commanded attention, whose missions defied expectation? Some would be inspired. Some would be intimidated. All would pay attention. And perhaps that was exactly the point. The general's hands, once clenched in tension, relaxed slightly. He had underestimated her, yes, but he would not underestimate her again. Iron Raven was here, and the mission depended on her skill, her judgment, and her unwavering presence. For the first time in years, the general felt both apprehension and anticipation. The woman who had arrived unannounced, who had defied his orders without confrontation, and who carried a reputation that preceded her in whispers and classified files, had changed the dynamic of the base. She was not just an operative, she was a force. And as he stared at the ceiling, considering the challenges ahead, Rourke knew one thing with certainty. Iron Raven's mission would succeed. Because no one, not even a general, could match her skill, her precision, or her determination. The realization was both humbling and unsettling. Outside his office, the base continued its routines, unaware of the full scope of her reputation, yet already feeling the subtle shift her presence had caused. Iron Raven had arrived, and Fort Adams would never be the same. The first alert came without warning. Sirens blared across Fort Adams, slicing through the early morning calm. Red lights flashed in the corridors, and a harsh automated voice warned. Reconnaissance team missing. Possible hostile engagement. Immediate response required. Soldiers bolted from their bunks. Officers hurried to command stations, and every routine operation ground to a halt. Panic was tempered only by training, but even the most seasoned personnel could feel the weight of impending danger. General Rourke stood in his office, staring at the flashing console, his mind racing. Reports streamed in, confirming what the sirens had already suggested. A team of reconnaissance operatives had gone silent during a routine mission. Their exact location was uncertain, but intelligence suggested they were in hostile territory, possibly surrounded. The implications were grave. Lives were at stake, and failure was not an option. For a brief moment, he hesitated. Normally, he would issue orders, mobilize teams, and rely on protocol. But the presence of Iron Raven changed everything. He remembered the briefing, her calm authority, and the precision with which she had already executed operations within the base. In his gut, he knew that this situation required more than conventional command. It required her. He tapped the intercom. Iron Raven, report to the operations center. Immediate operational oversight required. Within moments, she appeared. Her movements were deliberate, her boots barely making a sound on the metal floor. She did not need to be briefed. She already understood the urgency. Her eyes scanned the situation displays, absorbing every detail, every anomaly, every movement of the troops. "Sir," she said, turning to Rourke, "what's the status of the reconnaissance team?" He gestured toward the main monitor, which displayed a series of satellite images and encrypted transmissions. Team Bravo, last known location, Grid 17X hostile presence confirmed. They're cornered. We've scrambled support, but conventional units will be insufficient for extraction. Her gaze sharpened. She analyzed the data, cross-referencing troop positions, probable enemy movements, and terrain maps. Every detail was accounted for, every angle considered. Within seconds, she began formulating a plan so precise it seemed almost impossible. "Deploy an aerial diversion here," she pointed at a specific coordinate, "while the extraction team infiltrates from this direction. Avoid the main patrol routes. Use terrain for cover. Extraction window, 7 minutes. No unnecessary exposure." The general's aides exchanged stunned glances. Even trained officers struggled to keep pace with the speed and accuracy of her instructions. Every word was a command, every suggestion a blueprint for survival. Soldiers outside the operations center listened intently, some recording the instructions for clarity. Rourke swallowed hard. "And the risk assessment?" he asked cautiously, knowing her answer could either reassure or terrify him. "Minimal risk to team," she replied, voice steady. "High risk to extraction squad if delayed. Timing is critical. Every second counts. If we hesitate, we lose the advantage. Mission success depends on immediate compliance." The room fell silent for a heartbeat. The weight of her words was undeniable. She wasn't giving advice. She was orchestrating an operation with absolute authority. Officers who normally challenged orders found themselves following her instructions without question. Her presence alone commanded trust, competence, and focus. Within moments, she directed communications, coordinated air support, and briefed the extraction team via encrypted channels. Soldiers moved with renewed precision, executing maneuvers they had drilled countless times. Yet under her direction, each action felt sharper, faster, more calculated. The general watched silently. He had faced crises before, had made split-second decisions that determined life and death, but he had never witnessed command exercised with such calm decisiveness. He realized that while his authority remained, her expertise far exceeded his. He had tried to measure her against the base's hierarchy, but she existed on a different plane, one dictated not by rank but by skill, experience, and instinct. Outside, the base moved like a single organism. Vehicles roared to life, armored transports rolled toward deployment points, and aerial drones lifted into the sky. Soldiers followed precise instructions, timing their movements to the second. The tension was palpable, but under Iron Raven's command, fear was replaced by focus. Her calculated confidence infused the team with a sense of certainty they had never felt before. As the extraction commenced, she remained in constant communication with the field team. Enemy patrols were anticipated, ambush points avoided, and extraction routes recalibrated in real time. Each decision minimized risk, maximized efficiency, and ensured the safety of the team in hostile territory. General Rourke, standing behind the operations center's observation window, could only watch in awe. The woman he had dismissed was now the linchpin of a complex, high-stakes operation. Every movement, every decision, and every outcome hinged on her. She had not only earned his respect, she had commanded it through sheer competence. Moments later, confirmation arrived. The reconnaissance team had been successfully located. No casualties, minimal exposure, extraction executed flawlessly. Soldiers and officers erupted into controlled relief, some exchanging quiet congratulations, others simply absorbing the reality of what had just occurred. Iron Raven remained composed, issuing final instructions for extraction, retrieval, and debriefing. Her calm presence never faltered, not even as reports confirmed the mission's success. Her authority, quiet and absolute, had ensured the survival of every operative under her command. The general finally spoke, his voice low but firm. "Well done," he said, almost to himself. "Extraordinary work. You've proven what we already feared and hoped, that your skill surpasses anything we could have prepared for." She nodded once, acknowledging his words without pride or arrogance. "Sir, the mission succeeded because every soldier followed the plan precisely. Your cooperation was essential, that is all." Even as the adrenaline faded, the impact of the operation lingered. Soldiers and officers who had witnessed the crisis firsthand knew that Iron Raven's presence had redefined what was possible. Her calm decisiveness, expert planning, and flawless execution had not only saved lives, but had also reshaped the base's understanding of leadership, authority, and expertise. For General Rourke, the lesson was profound. He had ordered her off the base, doubted her authority, and underestimated her skill. Yet in the face of a real crisis, she had proven that rank and protocol were secondary to competence, experience, and precision. His silence, until now, had been a pause for disbelief. Now it was a pause for respect. As the sun set over Fort Adams, soldiers returned to their posts, officers filed reports, and the base gradually settled into routine once more. Yet beneath the surface, a subtle shift had taken hold. Everyone understood that Iron Raven's presence was no ordinary deployment. It was the arrival of a legend. And in her quiet observation post, Iron Raven prepared for the next phase. The crisis had been managed, but the mission was far from complete. The general, standing alone in his office, reflected on what he had learned. Authority was not always visible, and expertise was not always ranked. Iron Raven had arrived, commanded the impossible, and survived scrutiny at every turn. Fort Adams had witnessed her legend firsthand, and no one would ever forget it. The morning after the crisis, Fort Adams was quiet but tense, the residue of adrenaline lingering in the hallways, drill yards, and mess halls. Soldiers and officers who had witnessed the previous day's events moved with a cautious sense of reverence. The whispers of Iron Raven had grown into hushed conversations, awed speculation, and quiet acknowledgement that the legend was not a rumor, it was real. Outside the base, a sleek convoy of armored transports and specialized tactical vehicles was assembling. The reconnaissance mission had revealed critical intelligence about an impending threat beyond the base, one that could compromise national security if ignored. The operation required precision, timing, and skill beyond the capacity of conventional units. Naturally, Iron Raven would lead it. She emerged from her quarters, boots echoing against the concrete, her demeanor calm, collected, and utterly commanding. Officers and soldiers alike instinctively cleared paths for her. There was no need for orders. Her presence demanded attention and compliance, not through rank, but through sheer competence and experience. Every eye followed her movements, every mind registering the silent authority she exuded. General Rourke watched from the observation tower, binoculars tracking her movements. He had spent decades commanding troops in high-stakes operations, yet he found himself in awe. Iron Raven's approach to leadership defied convention. She did not bark orders. She did not assert dominance through protocol. She led by example, her calm decisiveness inspiring trust and focus in everyone around her. A lieutenant approached the general. "Sir, she's assembling the team herself. No one is directing her. She's choosing her own personnel and strategy." Rourke nodded slowly, understanding the gravity. "Let her. This isn't a base operation. This is beyond our standard protocol. We follow her guidance or risk failure." By midday, the convoy had departed the base, moving swiftly toward the coordinates Iron Raven had determined. Satellite feeds and reconnaissance drones tracked their progress, relaying data back to the operations center. Every maneuver was precise, calculated, and executed with near-perfect timing. The general observed as Iron Raven coordinated movements through encrypted channels, communicating only the essential information, her voice calm and authoritative. The intelligence indicated hostile operatives were entrenched in a remote valley, prepared to ambush conventional units. Any delay, misstep, or miscommunication could result in casualties. But under Iron Raven's guidance, the convoy moved with fluid coordination. Teams took cover, drones provided surveillance, and extraction points were secured, all orchestrated without hesitation. Her eyes scanned the terrain with a predator's precision, noting choke points, enemy patterns, and environmental hazards. She anticipated threats before they appeared, directing the convoy and supporting units with a mix of strategy and instinct that only years of field experience could produce. Every decision was a calculated balance of risk and reward, executed flawlessly under extreme pressure. General Rourke, observing the operation unfold, finally understood why the Department of Defense had bypassed protocol to place her in command. No standard officer could have executed this mission with such efficiency. No conventional team could have anticipated every contingency, every threat. She was a force multiplier, a living embodiment of skill, experience, and precision that defied expectation. Hours into the operation, contact was made. Hostile operatives attempted to engage the convoy, but Iron Raven's preemptive positioning ensured that the team held the advantage. The soldiers under her command moved with discipline and confidence, responding to subtle cues from her instructions. The enemy, expecting conventional tactics, found themselves countered at every turn. The general watched in silence, his admiration tempered by a profound understanding of her skill. He had always valued planning, hierarchy, and protocol, but Iron Raven operated beyond those constraints. She had studied every variable, anticipated every outcome, and prepared contingencies that ensured mission success. Her authority was unquestioned, not because of rank, but because she had proven it through action. In the valley, the operation reached a critical phase. Iron Raven herself coordinated the extraction of the reconnaissance team. Using terrain for cover, she directed precise maneuvers that neutralized threats while ensuring minimal exposure. Every movement was calculated, every decision executed with speed and clarity that left no margin for error. Soldiers reported back in awe, "We've never seen command like this, sir. It's flawless." Even those who had doubted the whispers, who had questioned the legends, were now witnesses to the reality. Iron Raven was unparalleled. She moved through the chaos with calm focus, her presence inspiring confidence, her decisions saving lives. By late afternoon, the mission was complete. The reconnaissance team had been extracted, hostile operatives neutralized, and sensitive intelligence secured. Casualties were zero. Success was absolute. Every soldier returned with the knowledge that they had been part of an operation executed at a level far beyond conventional military standards. Back at Fort Adams, the return of the convoy was met with quiet acknowledgement. No fanfare, no applause, but a deep, collective understanding. Iron Raven had arrived, commanded the impossible, and succeeded where others would have failed. Officers and soldiers alike absorbed the lesson silently, knowing that this mission had reshaped their understanding of leadership, skill, and authority. General Rourke, standing in the operations center, finally allowed himself a nod of respect. He had underestimated her, doubted her authority, and questioned her presence. Now he understood. She was not merely an operative. She was a force capable of redefining operational command. His silence, his hesitation, and his awe were the only appropriate responses to someone of her caliber. Iron Raven, as always, remained composed. She oversaw the debriefing, ensured every report was filed accurately, and coordinated with intelligence officers to secure sensitive data. Her demeanor never wavered. She did not seek recognition, did not boast of success, and did not demand praise. Her mission was complete, her skill demonstrated, and her authority unquestioned. As night fell over Fort Adams, the base settled into a quiet routine. Soldiers returned to quarters, officers filed reports, and the operations center finally began to unwind. Yet beneath the surface, a subtle shift had occurred. The base had witnessed a new standard of excellence, a new type of leadership, and a presence that could command respect without assertion. General Rourke remained in his office, reflecting on the events. Iron Raven had arrived unannounced, bypassed protocol, managed a crisis, and executed an operation beyond conventional expectations. She had reshaped the base's understanding of authority and skill, and he knew with absolute certainty that Fort Adams and its personnel would never be the same again. Iron Raven had moved beyond the base, beyond protocol, and beyond expectation. She had demonstrated unequivocally that skill, precision, and calm decisiveness were more powerful than rank alone. And as she prepared for the next phase of her mission, the legend of Iron Raven grew, quietly, inexorably, in the hearts and minds of everyone who had witnessed her in action. The dawn over Fort Adams was crisp, the sunlight cutting through the morning haze, illuminating a base that seemed quieter, yet more purposeful than ever. Soldiers walked with a renewed sense of respect for their roles. Officers consulted one another with greater diligence, aware that the standard they had previously measured themselves by was now elevated. Every corner of the base carried the subtle imprint of Iron Raven's presence. General Rourke stood on the observation deck, surveying the grounds. The events of the past week replayed in his mind. The first encounter with Iron Raven, her silent authority in the briefing room, the crisis that tested the base's operational limits, and the flawless field operation beyond the walls. For the first time in decades, he felt a mixture of humility and admiration. His decisions, experience, and authority had been significant, but here was someone who had redefined what leadership truly meant. The personnel who had directly witnessed her actions were quietly spreading the lessons they had learned. Trainees spoke in awe about the calm decisiveness she exhibited under pressure. Officers discussed how her preparation and foresight had changed the course of the crisis. Intelligence analysts marveled at the precision with which she had interpreted incomplete data to create a flawless plan. Rumors had transformed into verified legend. Iron Raven was no longer just a call sign. It was a symbol, an example of excellence that demanded recognition. Inside the operations center, Iron Raven oversaw the final debrief of the field operation. Maps were updated, intelligence was cataloged, and after-action reports meticulously completed. Yet she remained calm, her posture composed, eyes alert but unflinching. No one dared to disturb her focus, for it was clear that distraction, hesitation, or misstep could compromise the precision she had worked tirelessly to maintain. Every soldier, every officer understood that her authority was earned, not granted, and that it extended beyond rank and protocol. General Rourke finally entered the operations center, his usual commanding presence softened by respect. He approached Iron Raven, noting the effortless way she managed the debrief, guiding personnel with a quiet, unshakable confidence. "Raven," he said, using her call sign intentionally, "you've changed everything here. Not just the mission outcomes, but the way this base and everyone in it understands authority and skill." She looked up, calm and composed. "Sir, the objective was clear, and the teams executed their roles flawlessly. The credit belongs to everyone who followed the plan. My presence only ensured precision and coordination." He nodded, understanding both her humility and her unspoken assertion of command. "I underestimated you. I tried to dismiss your presence initially, and I was wrong. You've proven that leadership isn't just about rank or orders. It's about execution, judgment, and decisiveness under pressure. You've set a standard no one here will forget." A ripple of acknowledgement spread across the room. Soldiers and officers who had been present for the operation understood the weight of the words. Even those who had doubted her skills were now witnesses to her undeniable competence. Iron Raven's focus remained unwavering, yet a subtle acknowledgement passed through her expression. Respect was given where it had been earned. Her mission was complete, yet the lessons she imparted would endure far longer than the debrief. Outside the base, Fort Adams had begun to resume normal operations, but the atmosphere had changed. Soldiers moved with a sense of purpose, officers approached challenges with heightened awareness, and even routine drills carried the imprint of heightened standards. Every corner of the base bore witness to the impact of her presence. Later, General Rourke convened a meeting with his senior officers. The discussion was not about the mission itself. They knew it had succeeded beyond expectation, but about the precedent it had set. They discussed the implications of placing operatives of such skill into situations requiring independent authority. They debated adjustments to protocols, training, and operational planning. Yet beneath every word, there was a unanimous understanding. Iron Raven had demonstrated a model of excellence they could not ignore. Meanwhile, Iron Raven prepared for departure. Her mission at Fort Adams was complete, but her next objectives awaited. The base had seen only a glimpse of her capabilities, a single chapter in a career defined by precision, courage, and unparalleled skill. Soldiers lined the compound silently as she walked toward the extraction point. No applause, no fanfare, yet her impact was unmistakable. Every eye followed her, every mind silently acknowledging the legend that had walked among them. As she boarded the helicopter, General Rourke approached once more. "Raven, before you go, know this. You've left a mark here that will last. Your presence changed everything, not just the outcomes of missions, but the way every soldier here approaches duty. You've set a standard that will influence Fort Adams for years to come." She nodded, a faint acknowledgement as the rotor blades began to churn the air. "Thank you, General. The teams executed their roles with precision. That is the true measure of success." The helicopter lifted, carrying Iron Raven beyond the base, toward new missions, new challenges, and new opportunities to redefine what was possible. Below, Fort Adams watched silently, each person contemplating the lessons learned, the stories they would tell, and the legend they had been privileged to witness. For General Rourke, the reflection was profound. He had confronted his assumptions about authority, skill, and leadership. He had learned that true competence could transcend rank, and that exceptional individuals could shape outcomes in ways no protocol could anticipate. Iron Raven had taught him humility, respect, and the importance of recognizing talent when it appears unexpectedly. As the helicopter disappeared into the horizon, the base gradually returned to routine. Yet the legacy of her presence remained embedded in every action, every decision, and every conversation. Soldiers remembered the calm decisiveness, the flawless execution, and the quiet authority that had defined her time at Fort Adams. Officers carried forward the lessons of precision, foresight, and leadership. And General Rourke, reflecting in his office, understood that he had witnessed something extraordinary, a living legend, whose influence would endure far beyond her physical presence. The story of Iron Raven would be told in whispers, in briefings, in quiet conversations over years to come. She had arrived unannounced, defied expectation, executed the impossible, and departed without seeking recognition. And in every memory, every report, every lesson learned, her legend lived on. Fort Adams would never forget the operative who had walked through its gates, changed its operations, commanded respect without authority, and left a legacy that would inspire generations. Iron Raven had arrived, executed flawlessly, and departed, leaving behind not just a mission completed, but a standard of excellence that no soldier, officer, or general would ever forget.